make money, which is your job. You're doing this to make money. Are you doing this for free?
This I'm not making money on. I run a financial firm. This is just a YouTube channel we have. I don't work for Fox, CNN, MSNBC.
It's for a YouTube channel. But eventually you expect to make money off of this somehow.
Oh, no doubt about
directly
it.
Or indirectly.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
No.
I mean, it's like you running McAfee, right? You're running it to make money. But partially, I agree with what you're saying on the part that, and that's one of the reasons why I'm asking you. I'm asking you to know if somebody's watching this thing. So where do I get my source where I can say, you know, my opinion is always watch both sides to kind of get the argument. If somebody's building this side up, study the other side. If somebody's building this side up, watch the other side. But how do you know what information is coming? Maybe someone doesn't have your kind of resources.
Use common sense. Let's start with the fact that they're there to make money. So obviously, you're going to try to beef up your story in such a way that you make the most money. How do you do that? You get the most views. How do you get the most views? To have the most radical story or the most unusual.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I think.
Okay, so let's start with that. Let's start with that. So I'm watching the news, and somebody says something, and they're focusing on this. My first question is, that just doesn't sound right. I'm sorry. It just doesn't sound like human nature. I mean, because what is human nature? We are loving people. We are hopeful. We have dreams, and we're compassionate. We have grace. But don't we also have anger and fear? Aren't we jealous people? Aren't we greedy people? Well, take that package and you put that inside, or put that in the guy who's telling you the story. Because that's who's telling the story. A guy who has, thank you, sir, a guy who has grace, compassion, fear, jealousy, and greed. Okay, that's who's telling the story. Each of these things are going to manifest in the story. You're getting the story through this man. You're not getting the story. The story would be the man shutting up and just showing videos. This, and you figure it out. No, instead, we have a commentator, someone who will explain this to you. You're over 21. Do you need stuff explained to you? Please, if you do, then you need to do something with yourself. If you don't, why are you even watching this? Why are you even watching someone tell you what's really happening?
So you're actually saying don't consume content.
No, what's the point?
Okay, complete different perspective. Interesting. So let me ask you to follow up on that. Do you actually believe that Russia did have any kind of involvement in it, or no? That's not you. To you, it's. I don't think Russia had anything to do with the election.
I'm almost certain that, at least from a hacking standpoint, that Russia had nothing to do with it.
From the hacking standpoint.
From the hacking of the DNC, all of these other things. No, absolutely. Why? Because everything pointed to the Russians. Think about it. All right. So the DNC, they found the malware. It had the Russian language. It had a compile time that matched the business hours in Moscow. It had a Cyrillic keyboard that was used. That's the Russian keyboard that's used to create the program. On and on and on. Please, God, do you think that anyone in the Kremlin, anybody who is part of the Russian state, now imagine, Igor, you left your name in the program. Oh, I'm sorry, boss. My wife was sick. I ran home at lunch. I forgot. Do you think that actually happens? Please, God, no. You don't leave your language, the time of the compile, names, the type of keyboards you use, everything that points to you as Russia. Do you actually think the CIA or the NSA would do that? Yeah, we're going to hack Russia, but we don't care what leave the English language in there. Put Washington in there. No, please God, you hide it. So you're not going to do something at that level, something that horrific, and be lax about writing the program that actually does it. This is the typical thing that hackers do to point away from themselves and toward their worst enemy.
Kind of like when you said the house, you bought a house recently and you said my house is located in this area, but I've never been to that place before.
No, why?
Redirect
I don't want people knowing where I live.
Yeah. So okay, to follow up on that. So you, I think at one point you worked with Booz Allen as one of the top 5 consulting firms, and I think Snowden also worked there at some point. He worked there as well himself. Obviously different responsibilities, but they have a lot of credibility for what they do. What do you think a Snowden is, or some of these whistleblowers are for the marketplace? Do you think they do good, or do you think they do bad for the information they're given to us when we see all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this is really what happened. Should I believe it? Should I not believe it? MSNBC said, you shouldn't read it anyways. It's private information. It shouldn't be something you should do. You should be embarrassed of yourself if you read it. Oh, you should read it. What do you think about a Snowden in the marketplace?
First and foremost, you're taking Snowden, the definition, the character, that the person as created by the media, as the truth. That he in fact did, well, he did in fact work for Booz Allen. He was a whistleblower. He ended up in Russia, da-da-da-da. Do you realize how many other alternatives there are? Yes, that he still works for the CIA, and this is some massive disinformation thing that is keeping the world occupied while the CIA does something totally different. You think that's not a possibility? Do you think there are 10,000 different ways we can define what Edward Snowden is and why he did what he did? Is it good for the market? Well, hell yes. Anything that brings attention to any specific area of life is good for that area of life. That's a fact of life, whether it's good or whether it's bad. I mean, P.T. Barnum said it the best. There is no such thing as bad press if they spell your name right. Because in the end, people remember the name and everything else gets lost in the shuffle of life. But yes,
to read into it, is that a good thing? Is me the person that's trying to use my common sense to come up with a proper opinion, an educated opinion? Should I take his information and say, I'm going to consider this when it comes down to poll time to vote?
If you think he's a whistleblower, then you would take that information and use it for the good. If you think it's disinformation that was planned 10 years ago by the CIA, and Edward Snowden is one of these great actors. I mean, first and foremost, please, why didn't anybody ask how he ended up in Russia? If you go back and watch things, he was in Hong Kong, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, if I was in Hong Kong, I was really on the run. I would just fade into the back alleys of Hong Kong. I'm a technician, grab some cute little, Hong Kong girl and get an apartment somewhere and live happily ever after. But he was on his way to Ecuador. Keep this in mind. Was he not? Mm-hmm. He was on his way to Ecuador. Why? Ecuador is the place that once you get there, no one's going to get you out. How? From Hong Kong, he goes to Russia to then go to Ecuador. And when he gets to Russia, he's not allowed to leave. Now, right off the bat, I travel a lot, and I know the routes that people take. If I want to get to Ecuador from Hong Kong, the last country in the world I'd go through is Russia. You've got 50 different options, or even direct flights from Hong Kong to Ecuador. Why the heck is he going through Russia? So it's hard for me to say, is it good? Is it bad? I don't have all the facts, and neither do you, and neither do any of you. You have the facts that the media has given you. End of story. And the media, as we are well aware, will modify stories according to how much money they're going to make from this story. End of story.
So, James Comey just came out with a new book. It's called A Higher Loyalty. What do you think about James Comey in this whole situation? 1 minute he's saying, here's what happened. Another minute he's saying, that's what happened. What do you think about James Comey's position right now? Or do you have an opinion on it at all?
I only have opinions on things I have personal experience with. My only personal experience with James Comey is a year and a half ago when the FBI wanted a master key for the iPhone that was taken from the shooter in California, the quote terrorist, wanted a master key. I got up in arms because that would be the worst thing that ever happened in the world. And so on a Wednesday, and this is all documented, on a Wednesday I had a 15-minute debate with the James Rogers, who is the mouthpiece of the FBI, one of the slickest characters I have ever come up against. So we had a 15-minute debate. But I really researched his background. No way to win a debate on his terms. And because he comes in saying, do you want privacy or security? So I changed the debate at the table and said, well, I don't know anything about privacy versus security. I wish I did. We could talk about it. But I would like to talk about security versus less security. Because if you get a master key, America's going to be less secure. Okay, so that sort of threw him off. And at the end, he said, well, maybe we can work together. Okay, that was on a Wednesday. On a Monday, James Comey, and by the way, I said, please give me the phone. I will unlock it and give it back to you tomorrow. I said that publicly more times than once. Everybody knew. On Monday, James Comey is testifying in Congress. The specific question was, Mr. Comey, have you pursued every offer of help? He said, yes, we have. That's utter bullshit. Nobody ever called me after that. Nobody ever called me. And I'd been talking for 2 weeks saying, I will unlock the phone. So, no, they did not pursue my offer of help. And to think that Mr. Comey would not be aware that I had offered to help after this CNN, national broadcast, it's untenable to think he did not know that. So in Congress, he lied. He lied to Congress. Do you realize what an offense that is in America? He said, yes, sir, we have pursued every avenue. Not one FBI agent, no one, not even a secretary, called me to say, well, what are your terms? Can you really do it? No, they did not pursue my offer of help. That's all I know about Mr. Comey. That's all I can say.
What conclusion do you come up with that? Or do you come up with any conclusion?
The FBI, like any law enforcement agency from local police on up that has enormous power, will have enormous corruption. I mean, power corrupts. It does. If you don't see that or know that, please read some of the philosophers or, just do some Google searches. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The FBI is a very powerful organization, so of course they have corruption. Now, it's not universal. It's not every agent, but it's a lot. It has to be. And it certainly affected Mr. Comey. This is all I know personally about the man. This is not secondhand information. This is my observation, having dealt with the FBI at that level.
Should the average citizen trust the FBI based on what you're saying?
The average person shouldn't trust anybody. I mean, I don't want to be cynical again. But please, what does that mean? Trust somebody. I mean, please, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I mean, anybody in a time of war who's ever been tortured or was a torturer knows the following: you will talk. You will turn in your mother if the pain is intense enough and long enough. This is a fact of life. So do you trust your mother? Of course you do, to be a mother. But what does that mean, trust someone? Trust someone what, with your wallet? Yeah, I'd probably trust Comey with my wallet. I mean, for him to steal it would be too obvious. Trust him with my wife? Maybe a little bit less. Trust him with my life? Trust him with what? What does that mean? Do you trust somebody? Trust with what, sir? Because there's no such thing as trust, meaning whatever happens, I trust you in this situation and in all situations. You cannot do that. I wish we could.
Interesting perspective. So let's transition a little bit to Bitcoin and then we'll wrap up. So when it comes to Bitcoin, you have been known as one of the bigger voices, if not the biggest voice in the Bitcoin world. And you've said, I think your prediction was by the end of 2018, you think Bitcoin's going to hit 78,000. I think your projection was 78,000 by the end of 2018. I think you said $1 million.
No, I didn't make a 2018 projection. I made a 2020 projection of 1 million.
I think you said 78,000 to somebody for 2018. I remember seeing 78,000. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
You may have seen that, and it may have been written, but I promise you I did not say that.
Quite a few people said $40,000, $50,000. You're probably even higher than that in your estimation if it's going to get to $1 million by 2020. They're saying $40,000, $50,000 by the end of 2018 is what many people are expecting now.
No, my figure's at 78,000 by the end of 2018.
Yeah, so are you familiar with Jordan Belfort? The guy, the Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah, of course.
I interviewed him. I was at his place, and we were sitting down talking about Bitcoin. And I said, tell me what you think about Bitcoin and what's going to happen. He says, I am telling you, there are not a lot of things I have guarantees of. I guarantee you Bitcoin is going to have a sudden, from wherever it's going to go to all of a sudden nothing, and everyone's going to lose their butt, lose their tail. They're going to lose everything they have. You have a complete different perspective on Bitcoin because of the way you describe it. Tell me your point of view on Bitcoin. Why you think Bitcoin is going to go to $1 million by 2020?
Well, there's a bunch of ways to do it. The most common way is to take the number of users of Bitcoin. Because as Bitcoin expands in its user base, both people who hold the coin and people who accept the coin for payment, It's skyrocketing. It's skyrocketing. So it's not going to disappear. It can't possibly go to zero. It can only grow as the user base grows. So it's impossible. Belfort, I don't know how smart he is, he's wrong. He does not understand digital currencies and how they work. Listen, it's Pandora's box. The box has been opened. The spirits are invading the room, and they will not go back in. And you have to believe me, digital currencies will replace fiat currencies. Why? Good God, I have a wallet on my phone, which is an entire bank. Lending money, sending wires, I don't have to go to the bank. It takes me 10 seconds to do a wire. 10. I've got to go down to the bank, fill out a bunch of forms. No, that's nonsense. Utter nonsense. Do you think that is going to go to zero and we're going to go back to this incredibly dull and bizarre way of using money with banks? Please God.
So I got a rebuttal for that one. A question for you. So for me, you know, I've been in the financial industry for a while. Series 766. I run an insurance company. We do pretty well for ourselves. The part that concerns me with Bitcoin, I really want to hear your rebuttal on this. When Jamie Dimon is touching $7 trillion of money per day of transactions, that's not just money, that's a lot of political power with a lot of countries that are connected to that $7 trillion.
Yes.
And so he is one phone call away from so many different prime ministers, presidents, kings, sheiks, whatever you want to call it, because he's touching all these money. I'm not talking small money. We're talking big money here. You know what?
You mentioned $7 trillion.
$7 trillion is a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Okay. So
half of our gross domestic product.
If it goes in the direction of these 21 million, Bitcoins being used and 4 million is lost, I don't know the number that was lost. I think it's 4 million of them that was lost, some number like that. Don't you think a guy like that and these guys who control elections and control all these other things, don't you think they're going to make a phone call and they're going to say, hey, listen, Mr. Congressman, Mr. Senator, you want to do this again? You got to make sure you take care of this thing. You cannot let this Bitcoin stuff take off the way it is. This is out of control already. Don't you think they're going to make those calls to figure out a way to do what they've always done, which is, listen, small business owner wants to compete with a big business owner. How do you beat them? Very simple. Big business owner goes to somebody and helps them out financially in the political side and says, listen, make the barrier to enter more difficult. How do you do it? More regulations, more licensing, more laws, more rules, more this stuff. And so the new guy cannot come and compete with this guy. Right. He has, in a sense, a monopoly with two other companies, if you want to call it a monopoly. So that is my only concern with the argument you're making is...
But you're assuming that Congress can make whatever laws they want, obviously. They can outlaw Bitcoin. They can do what they want. You're assuming that there is a possibility of enforcing those laws. That's utter fucking nonsense. You cannot stop a distributed system that is worldwide. There is no law that you can make. If you had one person per citizen in the country, 400 million enforcers, you still couldn't do it. Well, because the enforcer will have to sleep for some point. It's not possible. Okay? Now, admittedly, the way the things were 6 months ago, when exchanges were centralized, you could shut down an exchange. You can't do that anymore. They've now decentralized exchanges. You can't stop it, you can't shut it down, and you can't know anything about it. So tell me, sir, how will you enforce these magical laws that Congress is going to make? Jamie Dimon has no power in this world.
So let me ask you this then, a follow-up to that. You remember what happened with China, right? When China was going through their... And Bitcoin dropped, I think, from 10,000 to 6,000. It came back up, obviously, to 10,000, but it dropped. And I think in an event or an interview, you said it dropped. That was one of the reasons, because China knew whatever it is that was linked to that. And then on top of that, they made it difficult for users to use Bitcoin to buy things. Okay, so go to that. So what if somebody says, let's make it difficult for these guys to use their Bitcoin? I don't accept Bitcoin. So then what happens to Bitcoin?
But how are you going to make it difficult? What are you going to do to make it difficult? That's my question.
I don't accept it.
Well, that's fine. Then you're not going to do business, because the guy who does, and you're not going to know that he's even accepting it. He's going to advertise on the dark web if he needs to.
So what if Chase comes and says, no problem, I own merchant services, Authorize.net. They own it. I do business with Authorize.net. Guess what? Your rates when you accept money from American Express, from Visa, MasterCard, is 1.25. You know how the numbers they have. But if you take Bitcoin, 6.75%.
But the banks don't even know what's happening. This is not through the banks. The bank's not involved. The bank has nothing to do with this. They don't even see it. It's an undercurrent because once you get the exchanges distributed, nobody sees it. The banks have nothing to do with it. But in fact, go ahead and do what you want on your credit card. We're not using credit cards. We got Bitcoins. Why do we need credit cards?
Yes, listen, let me explain to you where I'm coming from. I own Bitcoin myself, so I'm not coming from a point of view of I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, I
and
understand.
a very small portion, by the way.
But here's the misconception. The misconception is that legislation can have teeth. It's not possible. This is a distributed world. There is no legislation that can touch it. You can't change it. You can't fix it. You can't stop it. You can't control it. You can't direct it. You have no power. I don't make the laws. Make whatever you want. It will make no difference.
You are that certain about it?
Well, I'm a technologist, for God's sake. We're talking technology.
I mean, a lot of technology people have been wrong in the past before, though. But you're that certain about it.
Not wrong about their technology. And this is technology. I'm telling you something. Just like I can tell you antivirus software does not work because it cannot stop the hackers in the world. I said that earlier. Why? Because it technologically can't. Nothing can. Now, same thing with Bitcoin. You can't stop Bitcoin. This is a fact. Technologically impossible. Cannot be done, sir.
Is your number on the $1 million based on a math? And I know you're a math guy. I think you got a major in mathematics, right? I think you got a major in mathematics. And as somebody who's a math guy and your brain is wired, everything is math, did you come up with $1 million based on a formula, or did you come up with $1 million of assumption of what you think is going to take?
I came at it two ways. I looked at the number of users, the user growth, and I chose $1 million because it has to be more than $1 million. I can guarantee it. I came at it that way. It came up with maybe between 3 and 7 million. I came at it the mining way, okay, which I believe is a lot more valid. The last Bitcoin to be mined. Okay, there's 10,000 miners. Thank you, Jimmy. The difficulty rate for that last Bitcoin is going to be almost infinite. It's going to cost $4 to $5 billion to mine that last coin, and miners are going to do it. The value of that coin has got to be more than the work put in to mine the fucker. So if it costs, let's say, even $1 billion, all right, so $1 billion, the last one. Why don't you work backwards from there and find out what the end of 2020 is going to be? So two ways come up with the same number. Between, that's 5 million is probably the thing. 1 million, it's way outside the lower range, so I'm very safe.
It's fascinating watching your level of conviction that you have in the product.
It's not a level of conviction. I look at reality as objectively, not with what I wish it would be, but what it actually is. And it is not just Bitcoin. I'm talking about the entire, because there are 2,000 other coins. Bitcoin is not it. You know, Bitcoin is less than a third of the total market cap for alternative currencies. So no, you cannot stop them. You cannot change them. You cannot control them. Accept them and try to fix your life to get in line with reality.
Okay, so let me ask you this last question on the topic of Bitcoin. What would your if you were to be the devil's advocate of that same exact argument, what is the best argument that you've gotten that's made you question the Bitcoin side? Or have you had any? Has anybody said anything or made you look at?
I get are what if governments don't like it and stop it? I'm going, please, you haven't thought that through, people. Hell, no one has ever shown me a way to stop it. They show me ways to create laws. Well, good Lord, make all the laws you want. We do that all the time. In the 1930s, we made it a law that you could not drink alcohol. We consumed more alcohol per capita during that period than in any period in American history. Today, what are we doing? It's illegal, federally and in most states, to smoke weed. You find me a random person that doesn't smoke weed, sir. Well, you don't, perhaps, but maybe you do. Somebody in this room does. I can smell it on your clothes. Right?
Sorry, Sir Jimmy.